Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive. Long after the shops in Diagon Alley had shuttered their windows and the last lamplighter had vanished into shadow, a pale moon gleamed over the crooked rooftops and bathed the street in a silvery hush. All was still, except for the whispering wind and the faint clatter of goblin feet behind stone walls deep beneath the earth. Gringotts' wizarding bank stood tall and strange as ever, its snowy white facade gleaming even in darkness. A single lantern flickered at the entrance, watched over by two armored goblins with narrow eyes and long twisted fingers resting on their spears. All seemed well on the surface, but below, deep in the labyrinthine tunnels of the bank, far beyond the reach of daylight or ordinary spells, a door had closed. Not by accident, not by trickery. It had closed from the inside. Vault 813, a number few knew, and fewer still dared speak aloud. That night, alarms woke the slumbering goblin guards from their bunks like a thunderclap. Bells rang in tones no wizard could hear. Locks sealed, runes flared red, and a great silver bolt, enchanted by the ancient founders of Gringotts themselves, slid into place across the hidden door. Something had gone terribly wrong. By dawn, the news had reached the bank's highest chamber. A vault has locked itself from within. Such things were not supposed to happen. By mid-morning, a missive had flown to Shell Cottage, where Bill Weasley, the most skilled curse breaker in the country, was eating toast and reading a letter from Charlie. A knock came at the door. A goblin courier, short and tense. Bill's eyebrows rose as he read the message. "Vault 813, he muttered. Haven't heard that number since Egypt. Within the hour, he had kissed Fleur goodbye, packed his leather satchel with runes and relics, and set off for Diagon Alley. The goblins had called him in, which meant they couldn't open it themselves. Back at Gringotts, in a quiet chamber lined with black stone and steel-rimmed ledgers, two goblins whispered behind a curtain. "He'll never open it," hissed one. "Not this one, not even with his bloodline." "Still, he must try," said the other. "If the thing inside wakes fully before we find the fail word." They fell silent. A shadow passed by the curtain. Bill arrived by Flue powder, stepping out of the bank's green marble fireplace with soot on his coat and suspicion in his stride. Waiting for him near the vault elevator was an old acquaintance. "Kensal Stroud, Department of Mysteries," she said, brushing an invisible speck from her cloak. Her eyes gleamed with quiet brilliance. "Heard you were coming. This isn't just a cursed door, Weasley. It's something older." Bill nodded. "Older magic doesn't scare me." "It should," she replied without smiling. They were soon joined by a goblin with a sour mouth and eyes like storm clouds. Thornhook, a senior vault-keeper with fingers ringed in iron and hair braided in silver thread. "We do not open Vault 813, he said without greeting. "We investigate. No spells inside, no force, no mistakes." "Or?" Kenza asked. "Or we wake it." Bill blinked. "It?" Thornhook didn't answer. Instead, he turned and led them down. The elevator descended into the depths of Gringotts with a groaning hum. The further they traveled, the more the torches along the walls turned from gold to blue. The air thickened, and at last the cart halted at a landing none of them had seen before. Before them stood an archway carved not from stone, but from obsidian. Black glass shimmered in the shapes of beasts with too many eyes, and vaults that moved of their own accord. Kenza's voice was quiet. "This section's not on any map. It was sealed centuries ago," Thornhook muttered, pressing a taloned hand to the arch. "We only reopened it once, to bury something." The vault door at the end of the hallway was massive, twice the height of a man, wrapped in chains and sealed with an iron crest, a dragon eating its tail, carved in a single stroke. Faint, pulsing runes ran across the metal like veins. As they stepped forward, the air grew colder, and then a whisper, not in their ears, not in the hall, inside the vault, a sound like a name, remembered too late. Bill glanced at Kenza, who had drawn her wand but held it low. "That came from—" "I know," she whispered. Suddenly, the vault's surface shifted. Just for an instant, the metal rippled, like something had brushed against it from the inside. Thornhook snarled and stepped back. "You see now? It's aware and awake." Bill took a breath and stepped closer. "I've opened cursed tombs in the middle of sandstorms. I've dispelled blood magic older than Hogwarts itself. Whatever's inside will handle it." Thornhook's gaze was steel. "You misunderstand. This isn't cursed." Bill blinked. "Then what is it?" The goblin's voice was low as a grave. "It's alive." And as they watched, a faint click echoed from the chains on the vault door. One of the locks had just undone itself. The clinking echo of the unlocking chain rang down the corridor like a shiver of steel. Bill Weasley stood frozen, staring at the great vault door as if it might sprout arms and speak. Thornhook hissed under his breath in gobbledygook, his hand twitching toward a charm hung beneath his vest. Kenza Stroud stepped back, but her eyes never left the door. Whatever had just stirred inside Vault 813 had not yet finished. "Toad Luck wasn't touched," Kenza said, her voice low and measured. "No wand, no key, no magic. It opened on its own." Bill took a cautious step closer. The runes scrawled across the vault's surface were flickering, one by one, like candle flames in a draught. "Do you see that? It's shedding protections." "Waking up," Thornhook muttered, and this time he reached beneath his cloak and produced a small, rune-carved stone. "If it sheds the inner ring, we'll all be better off running for the sea." But Bill was already kneeling before the vault, his wand out, murmuring an incantation under his breath. Thin, silvery threads sprang into view, a detection spell revealing the lattice of enchantments layered across the vault's seams. The protections were ancient but familiar. Gringotts standard on the outside, then Egyptian bloodlocks, and beneath that, something darker, something pulsing just beyond reach. He stood slowly, brushing dust from his knees. "I can hold the structures stable, but I need to get a look at the anchor runes. They'll be on the inner ring, right behind the lock that opened." "You're not opening that door, Weasley," Thornhook growled. "No wizard steps inside Vault 813. You're here to stop it from opening, not to hurry it along." Bill turned, not defiant, but firm. "I'm not opening anything, but if it's coming open anyway, we need to understand what's behind it before it decides to come out. This door isn't cursed. It's part of a containment system. The real danger's inside." Kenza nodded. "He's right. If it unlocks itself completely, we may not have time to react. Let him look." Thornhook scowled. his thin mouth pressed into a line like the edge of a coin. He clearly didn't trust either of them, but he stepped aside. Bill approached the vault again, this time pressing the tip of his wand against the place where the outer chain had slackened. He whispered, "Revelio Matrix." The vault flared to life with colorless flame, runes etching themselves into the air. Kenza moved beside him, reading as he read. "It's a layered barrier," she said. "3 wards, stacked like nesting dolls. The outer one's goblin-forged, key-bound. The middle's blood magic. Yours, I think." Bill frowned. "Mine? You personally. Your family. There's Weasley blood in this spell work." He blinked, then stepped back, feeling the familiar coldness of old magic prickling beneath his skin. The Weasleys were a long line, old enough to have crossed with every major wizarding branch in Britain, but still, few had ever worked for Gringotts so deeply as he had. Unless... "You said this vault was buried. How old is it?" Thornhill gave him a measured look. "Sealed in 1382, forgotten for a century, rewarded in 1764 when something stirred in the deep levels, reopened once in 1888, closed again immediately after." "What was inside?" Bill asked. The goblin didn't answer at first. Then, at last, he said, "Not a thing you can describe, only a name scratched into the stone, a name we've erased from our records." Bill looked to Kenza, whose expression was unreadable. The silence was broken by a sound that did not belong in a vault corridor. A footstep, light and measured on the stone behind them. All 3 turned sharply. A figure stood at the far end of the corridor, half shrouded in the gloom. It wore a long traveling cloak, the hood pulled low. The stranger stepped forward, and the flickering torches revealed a face half hid beneath shadow. Human, but wrong somehow. The air around him rippled slightly, as if he were walking through water no one else could see. Thornhook drew a dagger from his belt. "This level is restricted." "I was invited," the figure said softly. His voice was quiet, but it carried a tone like parchment scraped by a blade. "No one invited you," Kenza said, lifting her wand. But Bill's eyes were narrowed. "Wait, I know that voice." The figure stepped into full view. Bill's breath caught. "Marius Greaves. You vanished 5 years ago." Marius smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. "And now I return, because Vault 813 is opening, and I am the only one who knows how to stop what's inside from getting out." Thornhook stepped forward, dagger raised. "You're a traitor. You fled with Gringotts' secrets. You're not welcome here." Marius didn't flinch. "I fled because the thing behind that door nearly took my mind. I was part of the first team that reopened it. The others, they never came back." Bill lowered his wand slowly. "What is it, Marius? What's in the vault?" The man's eyes, pale and cold, met his. "Not what. Who?" "She called herself Vatra." Kenza frowned. "Vatra? That's not a goblin name." "No, she wasn't goblin, not entirely. She was once human, long ago. A seer who learned to look not only forward in time, but backward and beneath. She went mad, claimed there were things beneath the world that whispered to her in dreams. She tried to bind them, trap them in runes and ritual. And, Bill asked. Marius turned to the vault, which had grown darker in the past minute, the runes now pulsing like a heartbeat. She didn't trap them. They trapped her. and now she dreams behind that door. But she's waking up. The second chain lock fell loose with a snap. This time the ground trembled beneath their feet. The tremor rolled through the tunnel like a great beast stirring in its sleep, shaking dust from the arched ceiling and rattling the iron sconces along the walls. The torches flared with strange green-tinged fire, and for one sharp instant the sigil on Vault 813 glowed red as fresh blood. Thornhook let out a snarl and shoved Marius Graves back with the hilt of his dagger. "This is your doing," he barked. "You should never have been let within a mile of this place." Marius stumbled, but did not fall. He steadied himself with one hand against the cold stone, his eyes never leaving the vault door. "I didn't come to open it. I came to delay it." Bill stepped between them before things could go further. "That lock didn't fall because of him," he said, voice level. "This was already happening, whether we were here or not." He turned to Kenza, who was watching the vault with her wand still raised. "If this woman, Vatra, was a seer gone mad, what sort of magic are we actually dealing with?" Kenza shook her head slightly. "The Department of Mysteries has no record of her name. But the idea of binding time, especially backwards and through physical space, it's not divination. It's a kind of temporal symbology. Dangerous, unstable, and mostly outlawed after the Tangle trials. The ones where 3 unspeakables vanished inside a memory vortex?" Bill asked grimly. "That's the one," she said. "If this vault was designed to hold something like that, then whatever's inside isn't just old or magical. It's warped. The rules might not apply in there. Then we have to stop the last lock from falling," said Thornhook through gritted teeth. "Because if that door opens fully, the only rules left will be hers." Marius stepped forward again, slower this time, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. "The vault is built on a seal. I saw it, a spiral of runes stretching down into the floor, all tied to her sleep. The locks weren't just mechanical, they were layered focus points. Each one keeps the spiral wound tightly, but if they fall out of order, since they take fewer ashes, we can find more freedom within our... And worse," Marius added quietly, "she might not come out alone." A silence followed that neither wand nor word could easily break. Bill exhaled through his nose and stared at the door. "All right. Then we don't let the third lock fall. We find the anchor runes, rewrite them if we have to, and buy ourselves time to reinforce the vault. Marius, can you guide me to that spiral you saw?" "I remember the pattern," Marius said, "but not the exact placement. We'll have to draw it out again. From memory." Thornhook growled, clearly displeased with every word spoken, but he didn't object. "You have 20 minutes, he said. "No more. After that, we begin the fail-safe protocol." Kenza narrowed her eyes. "Fail-safe? If the third lock falls, the vault collapses inward," Thornhook replied grimly. "Stone, magic, and all. We seal this level forever, and bury whatever escapes in a chamber of voided time. It's not elegant, but it's final." Bill's heart clenched, not with fear, but with the sheer weight of what was at stake. If they failed, this wouldn't be a matter for just Gringotts. Time magic run wild had a way of seeping beyond its boundaries. It could unravel memory, warp space, twist lives backward and forward until no one knew what had truly happened. He had seen it once, during a job in Carthage. An old coin hoard cursed to repeat the day of its burial forever. The curse had eventually infected the entire chamber, and it took 17 Aurors to close it. "We'll be done before 20 minutes, Bill said firmly. The corridor had grown colder, the torches dimmer. Marius and Kenza moved to the far wall, unrolling a long scroll and beginning to trace symbols, their voices a whisper of arcane language. Bill knelt beside the vault once more, wand in hand, and set about stabilizing the protections already faltering. He worked quickly, calling upon every ounce of his experience. His wand traced spirals into the air, silver lines glowing as he re-threaded runes and sealed frayed bindings. But the magic of the vault was resisting, not violently, but deliberately, as though it knew what he was doing and didn't want to be helped. Sweat pricked at his brow. He ignored it. Behind him, Marius muttered, "Here. This is it. This curve here. It matches the dream sigil from her cell." "She had a cell?" Kenza asked, not bothering to hide her surprise. "Of stone and sleep," he said. "It wasn't a room. It was a kind of spell. I saw it once, and only from outside. She was floating. Her mouth moved, but there was no sound, and the walls weren't walls. They were memories." Bill glanced over his shoulder. "Memories?" Marius nodded slowly. Thousands, all floating like threads around her, tangled into the runes. "I think that's what's feeding her. Or maybe what's keeping her trapped." Kenza frowned. "If she's feeding on memories, then we're already too close. Even proximity might be giving her strength." Bill turned back to the vault more urgently now. The final lock was beginning to hum, a soft rhythmic vibration pulsing from the central seal, the heartbeat of an enchantment preparing to break. He pushed harder, channeling power through his wand, redirecting the unraveling spellwork into a spiral binding. A temporary fix, just long enough to buy them the precious time they needed. The runes flared brighter, then steadied. For a moment, the corridor grew still. Then, a voice, low, soft, distant, yet unmistakably near. "I remember you, Red One." Bill's wand trembled in his hand. He looked up, and the surface of the vault was no longer steel, no longer solid. For a fleeting instant, it was a mirror, and in it he saw himself, not as he was, but as he had been. Younger, freckled, a cursebreaker fresh from training, standing before a different vault, in a different land. And behind his reflection, her eyes, dark, endless, watching. The spell snapped. The third lock clicked. The final lock fell with a hiss of ancient air and the soft clink of chains settling against stone, as though the vault itself had exhaled after centuries of silence. The heartbeat thrum that had been echoing faintly through the chamber grew louder, still low but unmistakable now and undeniably real. Bill staggered back, his wand still raised, the shimmering spiral of runes before him faltering like candlelight caught in a draught. Kenza reacted first. She rushed to his side, grasping his shoulder and pulling him clear as the vault's surface began to change. Where there had once been solid steel wrapped in enchantments, there was now a shifting curtain of dull silver, rippling like the surface of a pensive. Reflections moved within it, not their own, but others. Strangers, rooms long gone, faces no one had seen in lifetime. One blinked slowly and turned to face them, its eyes full of sorrow. "Now time," said Marius, his voice tight and hoarse. "She's pushing through the membrane. Once the surface fully transitions, the vault will open in truth." "But the locks are down," Kenza said, her voice low. "There's nothing stopping her now." Not unless we seal it again from the inside, Marius replied. That was the original method. When Gringotts couldn't close it from outside, one of the old keepers entered and bound the magic from within. That's why no one speaks of Vault 813. He never came out. Thornhook had his back pressed to the wall now, his dagger forgotten in his hand. His usual grim scowl had been replaced by a wary dread. "We are past protocol," he muttered. "This chamber will collapse soon. The fail-safe." Bill shook his head. "No. If we trigger the fail-safe now, we bury her in a crack of broken time, yes, but if she's still conscious, she could slip through the barrier. You said it yourself, Thornhook. She's aware. What if she's already inside the bank's protections?" Kenza glanced toward the flickering torches. "Or worse. What if she's already in us?" The idea was too terrible to contemplate. Bill turned again to the vault, still shimmering, still humming, and his mind raced. Something Marius had said earlier nagged at him, about the memories Vatra fed upon, the threads that floated around her prison. If those memories were still bound inside the spiral of runes, then there might still be a way to bind her using her own prison. But it would mean entering the vault, something none of them had ever dared consider. "I'm going in," Bill said abruptly. "No," said Kenza at once, moving to block him. "You don't know what's in there. None of us do. I've seen memory curses before," Bill replied, his voice calm but firm. "If this is anything like those, it'll be dangerous, yes, but not unbeatable. And I might be the only one here with the training to navigate it without being swallowed whole." "You don't know that," Marius said grimly. "I don't," Bill admitted. "But I know we've got minutes before this becomes an even worse disaster. If I can find the spiral and reactivate the bindings, I can trap her again. Or at least stall her until the Department of Mysteries can move in properly." "You'll need an anchor," Kenza said, frowning. "Something to tie you to this side. If the vault shifts once you're inside, it may try to keep you." Bill reached into his satchel and pulled out a small silver disc, flat, etched with runes and faintly glowing. "Carthage tether charm. I made it for a goblin lock maze. Should hold me here as long as someone maintains the thread." "I'll do it," Kenza said quickly, taking the disc and drawing her wand. "But I'm warning you, if the spell starts to fray, I'm pulling you back. No heroics." "No promises," Bill muttered with a faint smile. He turned once more to the vault door. The surface had stilled now, solid yet shifting like water under ice. He stepped forward slowly, wand at the ready, and passed through. And then the door slid shut. The air inside the vault was immediately wrong, thick and soundless, like being wrapped in velvet, soaked in memory. There was no floor, no ceiling, just a vast space filled with spiraling threads of silver and gold, each moving slowly as though caught in a dream. They weren't ropes or cords, but strands of thought, memories, suspended and glowing faintly, whispering to themselves as they turned. Bill stepped carefully along a narrow stone path that coiled like a snake beneath his boots. Shapes drifted in the distance, flickers of people, rooms, even stars. At the center of it all was a spiral, just as Marius had described, inlaid into the floor. It pulsed faintly, and above it floated the figure of a woman. She did not appear monstrous. In fact, she looked almost peaceful. Pale robes drifted about her in slow motion, and her long dark hair billowed in a wind that wasn't there. Her eyes were closed, but her lips moved. As Bill drew nearer, he could hear what she was whispering. Names, thousands of them. in a voice as light as falling ash. He swallowed hard, gripping his wand tighter. She was dreaming the names of every memory she had consumed. He stepped into the edge of the spiral, and the runes lit up beneath his feet. Her eyes snapped open. They were black from corner to corner, not cruel, but empty, as though she had forgotten what it meant to see. When she spoke, it was not with her lips, but from within his mind. "You remember, you carry fire." Bill raised his wand. "And I'm here to make you sleep again." She smiled faintly. Then the memories around him began to move. Faster now, circling, warping, twisting into illusions. He saw Fleur, but her voice was wrong. He saw Charlie, with eyes full of fear, then his mother, her face filled with sadness. These were not true memories. They were tools, weapons of confusion. He closed his eyes, focused on the spiral beneath him, and drove his wand downward. Runes flared in white light. The spiral flinched, and the vault trembled. Vatcha screamed. It was not a human sound. It was the tearing of time itself, and it filled the space like a storm. She lunged toward him, but the spiral reacted, its runes forming a shield of flame. He pressed his wand in deeper, shouting the binding incantation. The spiral burned. Then, darkness. For a moment, there was only silence, deep, pressing, absolute. Then, slowly, the world began to return. Shapes resolved into view, colors bled back into the air, and sound trickled in like water through stone. Bill opened his eyes. He was lying on the floor of the vault chamber, his wand clenched tightly in his right hand, the spiral beneath him glowing faintly with silver pool light. The runes had shifted. Where before they had pulsed like a beating heart, now they shimmered steadily, like moonlight caught in still water. The memories in the air had vanished, as had the woman Vatra and the warped illusion of her prison. It was quiet once more. His chest ached as he sat up, his limbs heavy and his thoughts sluggish. There was a taste in his mouth like old parchment and ash. He looked around. The inside of the vault was not large, not anymore. With the memories gone, the false space had collapsed inward, revealing a stone chamber no bigger than a common room at Hogwarts. The spiral in the floor was the only thing that remained of the original enchantment, carved deep into black slate and surrounded by a circle of goblin marks. 3 symbols flickered faintly above the center. Names, perhaps, or spells, but they were fading quickly. Bill staggered to his feet and raised his wand. The tip glowed, steady and bright. He turned toward the place he had entered, half expecting to find a smooth wall or an impassable void, but the surface still shimmered faintly, a doorway of silver light waiting to be crossed. He stepped through. The chill of the vault's magic fell away at once, and the corridor welcomed him back with the soft hiss of torchlight and the distant echo of movement. Kenza stood at the edge of the archway, her wand still trained on the silver disc in her hand. When she saw him emerge, her shoulders dropped with relief. "Thank Merlin," she said, hurrying to his side. "You were gone more than 10 minutes. Felt like 10 lifetimes," Bill muttered, brushing dust from his coat. "But it's done. The spiral's active again. She's sealed." Marius was seated nearby on a low stone bench, his face pale and drawn. He looked up with wide eyes. "You saw her?" "I did," Bill said quietly. "She wasn't what I expected. Not a monster, not really, just wrong. as if she had been pulled apart and reassembled with the pieces in the wrong places. That's what she became, Marius said, his voice hoarse, not what she was. Vatra was brilliant once, too brilliant. She believed she could build a map of time itself, a chart of every thread, past and future. But when she looked back far enough, something looked back. She said I carried fire, Bill added. She recognized me, or thought she did. Fire's part of the sealing spell, Thornhook said, stepping out from the shadows where he'd been watching in silence. Goblins call it ember binding, magic passed through blood. You said your family might have ties to the original binding. Perhaps that's what she felt. Bill frowned. If that's true, we need to find out which ancestor she was sealed by. That kind of connection might matter. Records from that time are fragmented, Thornhook said sharply, and for good reason. What lives in Vault 813 was never meant to be remembered. It's a wound, not a vault. We bury wounds. Maybe, Kenza replied, folding her arms, but burying wounds doesn't heal them. The tension in the chamber shifted subtly. The vault was sealed, for now, but none of them could pretend the threat was truly gone. They had stopped her waking, yes, but Vatra had opened the door wide enough to speak, and that alone was enough to disturb even the most hardened minds. If she could reach into thought, into memory, then she could still influence the world beyond her cell. Bill adjusted the strap of his satchel, feeling the weight of the runes and tools within. We should ward this entire level again, he said, stronger this time. Seal the entrance with more than goblin magic. I know a few Egyptian fire wards that could stabilize the spiral's influence. And I'll file a level 4 magical breach with the department, Kenza added. This doesn't stay between us. If anything in that vault survived the binding, it needs to be cataloged and contained. Thornhook growled, but did not object. We'll close this floor, he said. Burn the records again. Move the main transport cart routes. No one comes near Vault 813 without the right blood and the right oaths. Marius stood slowly. And what about me? They all turned toward him. His cloak hung loosely around his shoulders, and the edges of his sleeves were worn and scorched. There was something about him that had changed. His face thinner, eyes deeper, voice less sure. I was the one who helped open it last time, he said, and the only one who came back. You can exile me again if that's what you want. I'll understand. Bill studied him carefully, remembering the way Marius had spoken in the chamber, the urgency in his warnings, the steadiness with which he described the spiral and the memories. He had risked a great deal by returning, and more by choosing to help. No exile, Bill said quietly, but I think you should come with me. Help me track the records of the old sealing. If there's a Weasley name in those archives, I want to know which one. And you're the only person alive who's seen Vatra before today. Kenza nodded. You're not off the hook, Marius, but you're not our enemy either. Thornhook made a grumbling sound in his throat, but offered no further argument. As the three of them prepared to lead the vault corridor, the torches flickered once, then steadied. The door behind them had grown cold again, its surface smooth and still. But deep within the vault, far beyond their reach, the spiral continued to turn, quiet, slow, but not still. For now, the danger had passed. But beneath Gringotts, in the dark places no one spoke of, the oldest magic of all, the kind built from memory and time and madness, was never truly gone. The next morning dawned pale and uneasy, the sky above Diagon Alley a hazy shade of gray, as if the world itself had been unsettled by the events beneath it. A light drizzle tapped against the crooked window panes of the leaky cauldron, casting watery shadows across the tables inside. Bill sat near the hearth, hunched over a steaming mug of black coffee, parchment spread before him like a battlefield. The fire at his back crackled gently, but the warmth did little to ease the weight on his shoulders. Across from him sat Marius Graves, sharper looking now than he had been the night before, though the dark circles under his eyes betrayed a night of little sleep. He had brought with him a stack of copied records, half-crumbled ledgers, misfiled vault logs, and a few tightly bound volumes recovered from the Gringotts archive rooms. Kenza had gone to the Department of Mysteries early, leaving behind only a brief note confirming that Vault 813 had been reclassified under Level 5 containment. "Here," Marius said, tapping a page near the bottom of the stack. "This is the list of ward crafters who helped seal the deepest vaults after the rebellion of 1382. Most were goblins, as expected, but this name, Gideon Wesley, it's a misspelling. In other copies of the records, it's listed correctly as G. Weasley." Bill leaned in, frowning as he read the faded script. The ink was barely legible, but the shape of the name was unmistakable. "I've never heard of him, not in the family histories." Marius nodded. "You wouldn't. Most of the early Weasley lines split before Hogwarts was founded. Some took on tradecraft, others fell in with foreign circles. Curse snaking didn't begin with you. It began with him. Do we know what his connection to Vatra was?" Bill asked, already fearing the answer. "Only guesses," Marius replied, flipping another page. "He was among the last to leave the inner sanctum. Some say he was the one who finally got the runes to hold. He may have even crafted the spiral itself." Bill sat back, considering. If that were true, it meant the bond he'd felt inside the vault when Vatra looked at him and called him Red was more than just symbolic. It might have been blood recognizing blood. The Ember Binding, a spell passed not through teaching, but inheritance. "She knew him," Bill said quietly, "and through him she knew me." "She's still sealed," Marius reminded him, though his voice lacked confidence. "You stabilized the spiral." "I did," Bill agreed, "but she's watching. Even sealed, she's watching. That's what worries me." They sat in silence for a while after that, the sounds of breakfast clinking faintly around them. Somewhere nearby, a witch was arguing with a young boy about the difference between dragon liver and basilisk tongue. The world was moving on, as it always did, oblivious to what had nearly slipped into it from below. Later that afternoon, Bill returned to Shell Cottage. The sea was gray, flecked with white caps, and the wind carried the familiar scent of salt and gorse. Fleur was waiting at the top of the path, a shawl wrapped tightly about her shoulders, and when she saw him, she gave a small smile, not a cheerful one, but one of quiet understanding. "You went deep," she said, taking his hand as he reached the porch. "I felt it." He nodded. "There's a vault under Gringotts, older than most, dangerous. There's something trapped inside it." "Is it still trapped?" she asked softly. "For now," he replied. But she spoke to me. Through memory, through time, she remembered one of my ancestors, called him Red, called me Red. Fleur's fingers tightened around his. "Then perhaps she saw your strength, red like fire, not like blood. They sat together that evening beneath the pale orange glow of the setting sun. The gulls called over the rocks, and the tide rolled in slow and steady. Bill felt the tension in his shoulders begin to loosen, if only a little. That night he dreamt. In the dream, he stood once more before Vault 813. The locks were back in place, but they were made of sand, and the wind was rising. A voice, familiar now, rose from behind the door, whispering a lullaby in a language he did not know. The spiral beneath his feet spun slowly, and as he looked down, he saw the names of people he loved etched into the runes. Fleur, Victoire, Charlie, his parents, all drifting like threads through the stone. Then, at the edge of the spiral, he saw a shadow. It had no face, no shape, but it reached toward him with fingers of smoke, and when it touched his arm, it burned. He woke with a start, gasping, and looked down. There was nothing on his skin, no mark, no pain, but the heat of it still lingered in the memory, sharp as ever. The next morning, he sent an owl to Kenza. The letter was brief. "She's dreaming again. Something's leaking out. We need to go back." By noon, they were standing once more beneath the marble floors of Gringotts, in the corridor that no longer appeared on maps. The vault door had not changed. The runes glowed faintly. But near the base of the spiral, a single rune had darkened. Kenza crouched to examine it. "That's not goblin-made," she said. "That's new." "What does it mean?" Bill asked. She looked up at him, her expression grim. It's a name." Kenza brushed her fingers across the darkened rune, the tip of her wand tracing it once more as though its shape might change if she looked from another angle, but the curve of the line, the slanted stroke at its center, and the runic flare curling beneath, it was all unmistakably designed to resemble letters, not from goblin script, nor from the older Egyptian tongue Bill had studied in cursebreaker training, but from modern English. A shape had emerged naturally from the enchantment itself, or perhaps been pulled from the waking world into the dreamlike vault by sheer magical force. The name was Victoire. Bill stared at it, his throat tightening, the air around him suddenly colder than before. Victoire, his daughter, barely 10 years old, bright, curious, with a head full of golden hair and a fondness for the sea. He had told her bedtime stories the night before he left for Gringotts. He remembered it clearly, how she'd curled beside Fleur on the sitting room couch, half asleep before the story even ended. "She's reaching," he said, the words slow and heavy. "She's reaching into my memories." Kenza nodded, standing and tucking her wand back into her sleeve. "This isn't the same vault you entered last time. The bindings are holding, but she's probing now, testing the limits of the spiral, and if she's starting to pluck names from your dreams, she may be closer to waking than we thought." Thornhook, who had reappeared only minutes earlier, growled softly from behind them. "This is why I said we should have collapsed it. If we act now, we can still trigger the full fail-safe. The voiding chamber is prepared. It would mean the loss of this level and several others, but it would be final." "No," Bill said at once. "We don't know what part of her is dreaming and what part is bound. The fail-safe might destroy the spiral entirely. If it does, we lose the one thing still containing her, and we lose any chance to learn what she really is," added Kenza. "This is no longer just a containment issue. This is about understanding the nature of the magic we're dealing with. If she's feeding on memories, she's doing it with precision. That means she's learning. That means she's changing. They were interrupted by a low humming sound, distant but growing stronger. It came from the spiral itself, which now flickered with uneven light, some runes pulsing while others dimmed. Then, from the darkness beyond the vault door, a faint melody began to play, soft and lilting like the notes of an old lullaby. It had no instrument behind it, no singer, and yet the tune lingered in the corridor air, impossible to ignore. "She's calling," Bill said, staring into the runes. Not words, not even language, just a feeling. She's trying to get in again. Thornhook turned away sharply and marched down the corridor. "I'm fetching the prime key. If she's still reaching by nightfall, we lock this vault forever. I don't care what the ministry thinks." Kenza waited until the goblin had disappeared around the bend before turning to Bill. "We're running out of time." "I know. Then we need to go deeper, into the spiral." He looked at her sharply. "You're suggesting another descent?" "Yes, but not through the vault." She turned and pointed to the right-hand wall, where smooth stone curved behind an older sconce. "There's a passage hidden there. Goblin side tunnel. I saw it on the architectural runes when we were down here last. It leads beneath the spiral itself. If the vault is built around the binding spell, then the heart of the magic is under it. That's where we'll find what she's touching now." Bill hesitated only a moment. Then he nodded. "Let's go." Kenza stepped forward, murmured a charm beneath her breath, and tapped the sconce. The wall groaned softly and slid inward, revealing a narrow passage lined with old metal rails and forgotten torch brackets. Dust coated the floor like snow, and the air was thick with the scent of old magic. Iron, ash, and something fainter, like dried ink. They descended carefully, their wands lit, the tunnel winding downward into a place untouched for generations. The silence was heavier here, the kind that muffled even footsteps. The walls grew closer, then wider, until at last the tunnel opened into a chamber so vast it made Bill stop in his tracks. They stood at the edge of a circular pit, its walls covered in ancient carvings. Below them the spiral reappeared, not etched into the floor, but suspended in mid-air, floating like a constellation of silver thread. The runes spun slowly, and beneath them something darker moved. It was not a figure, not entirely. A shape, a presence, coiled like a sleeping shadow in the heart of the spell. "She's not just dreaming," Kenza whispered. "She's watching." As if in response, one of the runes broke away from the spiral and hovered before them. It pulsed once, then split open to reveal an image. Victoire, sitting on the floor of Shell Cottage, tracing stars in the air with the tip of her wand. Bill's breath caught. Kenza reached for his arm. "Bill, she's not just looking into your memories. She's learning how to use them." "She wants out," he said. "No," she answered. "She wants to be someone again." Another rune peeled away, then another. Faces appeared. His father, his mother, Fleur, Teddy, George, each suspended for a second before vanishing into the spiral. "She's building something," Kenza said. "A vessel. If she can form a body from memory, she might not need the vault at all." Bill stepped forward and raised his wand, preparing a binding spell. But just as he did, the spiral flared. The shape at the center opened its eyes. The eyes that opened within the spiral were not like the ones Bill had seen before. They were not human, nor goblin, nor even creature born. They were runes given form, shifting symbols within a dark pool of thought, flickering like candlelight behind glass. And yet, for all their strangeness, They locked on his as if they knew him, not from sight or voice, but from memory. Not his memories, but hers. Kenza's breath caught beside him, but she didn't speak. Her wand was steady, though a faint tremor had entered her stance. Below them, the spiral turned faster, the rune threads twining tighter and deeper around the presence at its heart. The floating images had ceased now, replaced by one consistent shape, a figure, half-formed, swaying gently in the suspended air. Its limbs were slender and unsure, like those of a marionette not yet bound by strings. Its head tilted slightly, and though it had no features, it gave the distinct impression of watching them. Bill tightened his grip on his wand. "This chamber shouldn't be active," he said under his breath. The containment was meant to end at the vault above. Kenza nodded grimly. "This is something she's built beneath it, a second sanctum, maybe even a breach point. She's trying to become real. And she's using your memories to do it," Kenza said. "We saw Victoire, Fleur, your family. But that means she needs more than just names. She needs connections, emotional ones. Magic built on feeling is always more potent." Bill stared at the figure, the way it hovered, how it pulsed faintly with each movement of the spiral. It was feeding off the runes like a flame lapping at dry parchment. "If that thing stabilizes," he said quietly, "we won't be sealing her again. She'll be out." They had to act, and quickly. Kenza pulled a leather-bound scroll from her satchel and spread it across the floor of the chamber. The parchment was marked with counter-spirals, anchoring glyphs, and a containment lattice used by unspeakables for breaches in space-time, rare, dangerous, and restricted to only the most experienced wizards in the department. Her wand hovered above the scroll, and she whispered the first command under her breath. The spiral above them reacted instantly. It shuddered, the threads tightening, and the figure let out a low hum that made the stone beneath their feet vibrate. The rune eyes flickered again, brighter this time, and one of them blinked. "She knows what we're doing," Kenza said. "She's resisting." "Keep going," Bill urged, stepping forward to shield her from the swirling threads that had begun to snake toward the scroll. He raised his wand high. "Protigo Maxima." The shield charm burst from the tip of his wand in a dome of blue-white light, holding back the rune threads long enough for Kenza to complete the next step. She drew a circle on the scroll, whispered a second incantation, and pressed her palm to the center. The tremor ripped through the chamber, and the spiral wavered. The figure inside faltered, limbs flickering, body distorting, but only for a moment. Then it righted itself again and extended one long, translucent hand toward them. From the figure's palm bloomed a memory. It hovered before Bill like a floating glass sphere, spinning slowly. Inside, he saw a moment from years ago, his 7th birthday, sitting beside Charlie at the burrow, holding a broomstick that was far too big for him. The fire crackled in the corner. His mother was laughing. It was real, warm, and whole. Bill staggered back, startled. The figure had taken it. "That's impossible," Kenza breathed. "You weren't thinking about that memory. She pulled it anyway." "She's not just searching now," Bill said, his voice strained. "She's reaching into me, without permission, without access. The spiral isn't a prison anymore. It's a keyhole." Kenza looked up, her wand hovering again. "Then we don't try to seal her. We collapse the spiral. But," Bill hesitated, "if we do that, we risk undoing the bindings that contain her essence, the ones holding her soul in place. She doesn't have a soul, Kentha said firmly. "Not anymore. That thing is a shadow, a spell given shape, a living curse." They made their decision without another word. Bill redirected his wand to the base of the spiral, while Kenza triggered the failsafe rune on her scroll. The spiral began to unravel, the threads spinning in reverse as if being wound backwards through time. The figure inside screamed. It wasn't a sound, but a sensation, cold, deep, and dreadful. The walls of the chamber shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. The runes along the spiral ignited one by one, flaring red, then white, then vanishing. The suspended figure began to crack down the center, lines of light splitting its form into pieces. Then, without warning, everything stopped. The spiral vanished. The floating figure shattered like glass. Silence followed. Bill and Kenza stood in the aftermath, their hearts pounding. The chamber empty now, but still humming faintly with the echoes of the spell that had lived there. The runes were gone. The spiral had been destroyed. Nothing remained but the stone beneath their feet and the memory of what they had seen. "We did it," Kenza said at last, though her voice was hollow. Bill wasn't so sure. He could still feel a faint pressure behind his eyes, like the echo of a voice that hadn't quite finished speaking. They made their way back through the tunnel, the torches flickering faintly along the corridor walls. When they emerged once more into the vault level, Thornhook was waiting, arms folded, expression dark. "Well," the goblin demanded. "She built a second spiral," Kenza said. "We destroyed it. The figure she was creating is gone." "Gone," Thornhook repeated, his tone flat. "Or scattered." "Both," Bill said. "Hopefully." Thornhook gave a non-committal grunt. "Then you'd best go rest. If she was reaching into your thoughts, you'll need more than dreamless sleep to keep her out next time." Bill opened his mouth to argue, but found he had nothing to say. He left Gringotts that evening beneath a sky of dimming stars. He felt hollow and tired, as though he'd been walking in someone else's dream and had only just found the door back to his own. But somewhere deep in the back of his mind, beneath every ward and shield and memory he had ever built, he could still hear the faint whisper of a name. Bill Weasley had known exhaustion before, the kind that settled in after long treks across cursed sands or weeks spent decoding ancient runes in goblin catacombs. But this was something else. It was not a weariness of body, but of mind, as if every spell he had cast and every thought he had dared to think had been weighed, measured, and filed away by something just beyond sight. When he returned to Shell Cottage that night, the sea was calm and dark, the waves whispering gently against the shore. Fleur met him at the door with a look of quiet understanding and drew him inside without a word. The following morning he awoke later than usual, the sun already high above the horizon. Victoire was outside, crouched in the sand with a stick in hand, drawing spirals in the damp shore. Her wand lay beside her untouched. Fleur stood at the kitchen window watching her, arms folded tightly, a faint frown creasing her brow. When Bill stepped into the room, she turned. "She said she dreamt of stars," Fleur said softly, "that they moved in lines, that they were speaking to her." Bill's stomach tightened. "Did she say what they said?" "No," Fleur replied, "only that it was important, and that it came from beneath." Bill stepped out into the salty morning air, his boots crunching on gravel. Victoire looked up as he approached, her eyes bright and curious. She smiled in that unconcerned way that children do when their world is still full of magic and games. Papa," she said. "The stars are different under the ground." He crouched beside her, examining the pattern she had drawn. It was crude, traced with a stick in the wet sand, but it was unmistakable. A spiral, nearly identical to the one he had sealed days ago. "Where did you see this?" he asked gently. "In my sleep," she said, brushing her fingers across the sand. "A lady told me it was a doorway. She didn't have a face, but she sang like the wind in the trees." Bill's fingers closed around the hilt of his wand. "She told me not to be afraid," Victoire continued, her voice low. "She said I was safe because you were there, but she said she might need help soon because something is wrong with the stone." Bill straightened slowly, heart thudding. The spiral was destroyed. The vault was sealed. And yet somehow, through the remnants of memory and thought, Vatra had reached his daughter. By midday he had returned to Gringotts. Kenza was already there, pacing the edges of the corridor outside Vault 813, with a scowl on her face and a leather folder tucked under one arm. She turned as Bill approached, her expression grim. "She's not gone," she said without preamble. "We might have shattered the construct she was building, but she's still inside the spiral's echo. The pattern's been reasserting itself, not in stone, but in people." Bill exhaled slowly. Victoire dreamt about her. She drew the spiral in the sand. "I was afraid of that," Kenza said, unfolding the folder. Inside were a series of sketches, notes, and diagrams, copied from a group of goblin monitors posted along the deeper fault lines beneath the bank. "Look at this. These aren't from the vaults. These are from the city." Two children in Nocturne Alley described spiral dreams. An old wizard in State Mungo started speaking in reverse time syllables before vanishing entirely into a locked memory state. It's not just proximity anymore. She's leaking into the world. Bill's thoughts raced. If she was no longer confined to the vault itself, if her influence had begun to seep upward through memory and thought, then what they faced was not merely the return of an old danger. It was a spread, like a curse infecting the consciousness of the magical world. "We need to contain it before it becomes a pattern," he said, "before the Ministry notices." "The Ministry already has," Kenza replied grimly. "They're calling it temporal drift syndrome. They think it's a side effect of unstable time-turners or broken prophecy strands, but they're wrong. This isn't a symptom of damaged magic. It's deliberate. She's searching." Bill ran a hand through his hair, eyes fixed on the still vault door. "We broke the body she was building, but she's rebuilding it through minds, through stories, through us." Kenza whispered. Kenza whispered. And legend spreads faster than fire. A sudden rush of footsteps down the corridor broke their thoughts. Thornhook arrived, cloak billowing behind him, eyes hard with purpose. He held a parchment scroll in one hand marked with the scarlet seal of the Goblin High Circle. "We have orders," he said without greeting. "Vault 813 is to be relocated." Bill stared. "Relocated? You mean moved?" "Not moved. Buried," Thornhook growled. "The High Circle has approved a ritual collapse of this entire vault level. We'll seal the door, fracture the anchor chamber beneath it, and entomb the spiral in solid bedrock. Magic, stone, memory, cut off from the surface." Kenza's eyes widened. "You'll destroy everything, including the record of what she was." "That is the point," Thornhook snapped. "Magic like this was never meant to be remembered." "But if she's already spread beyond the vault," Bill said carefully, "then sealing the source won't be enough. The pattern is loose. She could already be nesting in mines, in dreams. Thornhook stepped forward, eyes narrowing. Then let the vault die. Let the story vanish with it, before the ministry declares a crisis, before the world starts listening for her. There was a long silence. Bill looked once more at the door, cold and still, its runes no longer glowing, its surface dulled like old iron. And yet he could feel something behind it, a pulse, like a breath drawn in but not yet exhaled. He turned to Kenza. "We have one day before the collapse, don't we?" She nodded. "Dawn tomorrow. Then we use it. One last time, we go in, not through the vault, not through the spiral, but through memory itself. The places she's touched. If she's building a legend, then somewhere inside it must be her weakness." Kenza hesitated, but only for a moment. "A memory trace expedition. It's dangerous. So is everything else we've done," Bill replied. "But if we don't understand her, someone else will fall into her trap, and next time, they won't have the blood to resist." Thornhill gave a reluctant grunt, but said nothing more. By evening, preparations were underway. The vault would collapse at sunrise, and before then, they would have to walk through memory and find the place where Vatra first became real. The memory chamber beneath the Department of Mysteries was not a place often entered by wand-wielders of the everyday world. It was carved from the bedrock below the lowest levels of the ministry, and its walls shimmered faintly with threads of suspended thought, fine, silvery strands floating in glass vials, sorted by decade, by individual, by magical intensity. The chamber was circular and dim, and though its shelves were lined with more than 2 centuries of preserved memory, it was utterly silent. Sound, after all, could disturb remembrance. Kenza led the way past a sealed door marked Level 3 Containment Temporal Class. Her wand flicked once, then twice, and the door slid aside with a sigh of old air. Bill followed, clutching a sealed file in his right hand, his own memory, freshly extracted that morning, still glowing with faint gold at its core. "This section is reserved for raw trace memories," Kenza whispered as they entered. "Unsorted, fragile. Some were taken in the final hours of a life. Others were torn from minds half mad. If Vatra is nesting in thoughts, this is where we'll find her first footprints." Bill glanced around the rows of floating strands, his eyes lingering on a vial labeled simply, "Unknown Witch, 1890, Egypt." Its contents were trembling, the silvery coil inside shivering as though it felt them watching. He turned back to Kenza, who had begun searching through a thick catalog tome bound in dragon head. "Look for anything linked to the name Gideon Wesley," Bill said, "or anything about the spiral. If we can find the memory of someone who saw the original containment, we might see where she split off." Kenza nodded, flipping the pages rapidly. At last her hand stilled. "Here, a recovered memory from an Auror dispatched to Cairo in 1889, recovered from the body after an incident in the catacombs. It mentions a name, not Gideon, but something close. Wessler." She retrieved the vial and held it up. The memory inside was duller than most, tinged gray at the edges, but the core flickered with heat. They brought it to the pensieve and poured the contents carefully into the shallow basin. The swirl of silver and gray spun once, then again, before settling into a soft, glowing pool. Bill took a breath, then touched the surface. The chamber spun away. He landed in dust and darkness. The air was thick and close, and the ground beneath his boots was sand-packed stone. Torches flared in wall brackets, and a low chanting sound echoed through the tunnel ahead. He stood in a vast underground hall, half tomb, half temple, lined with crumbling statues and broken columns. Before him knelt 3 figures in dark robes. One was a goblin, his hands marked with ink. One was a witch, white-haired and trembling, and the third was a man, tall and thin, his cloak heavy with desert grit. "Gideon Wesley," Bill murmured. He didn't need a nameplate or introduction. There was something in the tilt of the man's head, in the sharpness of his eyes, that spoke of shared blood. The witch was speaking in a low, rhythmic chant. The goblin traced the spiral in the floor with a silver blade, and Gideon, holding something small in both hands, stepped forward and placed the object at the center of the rune. It was a vial, not of potion, but of memory. She wasn't trapped by walls, Bill realized. She was bound by thought. The scene trembled. The ground began to crack, not in the memory, but in the pensieve itself. A sound rose in the chamber, high and sharp, like glass being stretched too thin. Bill's hand flew to his wand, but it was already too late. The memory collapsed inward, and the silver dissolved into black. He fell backwards out of the pensieve, gasping, as the chamber around them flickered violently. Lights in the walls dimmed. One of the storage shelves trembled and tipped, sending 3 memory vials crashing to the ground. They did not break, but their contents swirled wildly, untethered. Kenza steadied him. "She's here, in the pensieve system. We triggered her." "She must have anchored herself inside the Gideon memory," Bill said, breathless. "That's how she keeps reawakening. She's woven into history. Every time someone remembers her, she grows stronger." "We have to go deeper," Kenza said. "Not just into memory, but into her legend." Bill looked up sharply. "You mean enter the memory she's created? If we can isolate the version of her that's feeding on belief, the story she's become, we might be able to trap that, even if we can't destroy her essence." Kenza was already opening her satchel and pulling out a delicate wand with a knotted crystalline core. "This is a narrative tracer. It finds story patterns in unstable memories. We'll anchor to the Gideon spiral and follow it through. But if she's built a world in there, we'll have to walk through it," Bill finished. Like actors in a story she's written, they prepared quickly. The second pensieve was smaller, more refined, and attuned to narrative magic. Bill uncorked his original memory, the moment he stood in Vault 813 with the figure of Vatra forming before him, and let it fall into the basin. The moment it touched, the surface turned to glass. Kenza gripped his arm. "Ready?" "No," he said, "but we're going anyway." They touched the surface together. This time, the world they entered was not real. They stood on a high hill beneath a sky that swirled with stars, but the stars moved in spirals, not constellations. The grass beneath their feet shimmered like threads. The trees nearby were made of parchment and ink, their leaves curling with half-written names. In the distance stood a tower, tall, dark, crooked, rising from the very heart of the spiral itself. "This is it," Kenza said. "The story she built, her version of the truth. And we're inside it now," Bill replied. Then, from the base of the tower, a door opened, and Vatra stepped through. This time, she had a face. Vatra's face was not beautiful, nor frightening, but something stranger, a composition of features half remembered, drawn from the minds she had touched. Her eyes were deep and dark, but not empty as before. They shimmered with layered memory, as though dozens of thoughts flickered just behind them. Her hair was black as ink, drifting without wind, and her robes, though simple, shimmered faintly with runes that shifted whenever she moved. She stepped forward from the tower's threshold, her feet stirring the spiraled grass as though she had walked this path 100 times before. She looked directly at Bill and Kenza, not as an enemy, not as a monster, but as a hostess greeting old guests. "I wondered how long it would take," she said, and her voice was both many and one. "To reach the truth, to step through the telling rather than the seeing." Kenza raised her wand at once, the tracer glowing faintly at the tip. "We're not here to listen to your story, Vatra. We're here to end it." The woman inclined her head, and a small smile curved her lips. "Then you have misunderstood the story entirely. You cannot end what you are a part of." "We're not part of anything you've created," Bill said firmly, though he felt the weight of her gaze pressing against his mind. "You're feeding on memory, on names, faces, feelings, and twisting them into something unnatural. That's not story. That's theft." "Is it theft to remember?" Vatra asked. She walked slowly now, her steps careful, deliberate, as though she were testing the world she had built. "Is it theft to rebuild what was taken from me? I was forgotten, cast into a vault beneath the world, bound not by chains but by silence. But I found a way to whisper again, through memory, through blood, through those who still dream." Bill's hand tightened on his wand. "That spiral was meant to contain you. You're trying to make it a doorway." "It already is," she replied. "You walked through it yourself." Kenza stepped forward, her voice sharp. "This world isn't real. It's a construct, a myth built on broken truths. And yet it holds," Vatra said quietly. She turned, motioning to the sky above, where stars continued to spin slowly in perfect, spiraled formation. "Because belief sustains it, because the mind is stronger than stone." "Then we'll break the belief," Bill said, "and bring it all down." Vatra's expression darkened. "You cannot destroy a tale once it has been told." The spiral beneath their feet trembled. A pulse of magic rippled outward, and the world around them flickered. For a moment, the trees turned to volstone, the sky to torchlight. Then it returned, grass and stars and paper-leafed trees, but the illusion was thinner now, the edges beginning to fray. "She's using my memory to keep it stable," Bill muttered. "That moment in the vault, the confrontation, it's the seed of this whole thing." "Then we need to pull it out," Kenza replied. "Undo the root." But before they could move, Vatra lifted her hand. A wall of light rose around them, shimmering and tall, spiraling with names. The same ones Bill had seen carved into the vault spiral, only now they burned. Victoire, Fleur, Arthur, Molly, George, all floating in the air like charms on a chain. "Every step you take here," Vatra said, "is laced with what you love. Strike, and you risk striking them." Bill hesitated. The sight of his daughter's name hanging before him like a thread of glass was almost enough to stop him entirely, but Kenza placed a hand on his arm. "She's bluffing," she said. "She can't reach through the story without you. You are the bridge." "That I have to break the bridge," he said, though the words hurt to speak. Vatra's eyes narrowed. "If you collapse this place, you collapse yourself." "No," Bill said, stepping forward. I collapse you." He raised his wand and drove the tip into the ground, calling the unbinding incantation from the deepest part of his training, a phrase he had used only once before, on a tomb so old its magic had bled into the bones of the earth. The ground beneath him shuddered. The spiral flickered, then fractured. Vatra let out a cry, not of pain, but of loss. The tower behind her trembled. Cracks spread through the parchment trees. The stars above began to tumble, one by one, breaking from their loops and falling in trails of ash. She lunged toward him, not as a shadow this time, but as a person, grasping, reaching. Her eyes were wide now, filled not with power, but with pleading. "Please," she said, "I just wanted to remember who I was." Bill met her gaze, and for a moment, he saw her not as a monster, but as a witch, a woman who had once sought to understand time, to weave prophecy and memory into something whole, and who had been broken in the attempt. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. He twisted his wand once more. The spiral collapsed. The world came apart like a book set aflame. Grass turned to sand. Trees became pages. Stars crumbled. The tower fell. Vatra vanished. Bill awoke with the taste of ash on his tongue and the feeling of falling still prickling across his skin. The chamber around him was still, its low torchlight casting shadows against the stone. Kenza lay slumped nearby, breathing shallowly but alive. The pensieve was empty. Its surface had gone dull and flat, as though the memory within had never existed. He sat up slowly, his muscles stiff, and looked to the far wall. No doors had opened. No alarms had sounded. But he felt it in the air, a stillness, deeper than silence, the kind of quiet that follows something ancient and terrible finally coming to rest. Kenza stirred beside him. Her eyes fluttered open, then focused. "We're out?" "I think so," Bill said, voice low. "Or what was left of her is." She sat up, brushing dust from her cloak. "The spiral, what you did, it worked. I could feel the magic collapsing around us like someone closing a book." "It wasn't easy," Bill said quietly, remembering the look in Vatra's eyes as the tower fell. "She wasn't evil, not really. Just lost. She built a legend out of pain and memory and tried to wear it like a body. And almost succeeded," Kenza added. "But legends without anchors vanish. Stories need truth. She had none left." They stood, brushing themselves off. Bill retrieved the file containing his memory, now dim, the gold light inside having faded to a soft, harmless silver. He tucked it into his satchel without a word. The two of them exited the chamber, stepping into the polished corridor that led back toward the lift. Everything looked the same, but there was a sense, subtle but present, that the shadows no longer stretched so far, and the silence no longer whispered. As they entered the silence, Solomon trailed after Paul and Daniel. Gringotts was quiet when they returned. Thornhook met them near the sealed vault level, a squad of armored goblins standing watch behind him. He looked them over once, his gaze narrowing slightly when he saw the thin scrape across Bill's cheek and the scorched hem of Kenza's robe. "Well?" he asked. "She's gone," Bill said. "We broke the construct, the legend. She won't be building again." Thornhook studied him for a moment, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. "The High Circle will proceed with the collapse at dawn. The vault will be sealed in bedrock, all access paths erased." "No objections," Kenza said, though her tone was tired. There's nothing left inside to study. She's dispersed. And the spiral beneath? Thornhook asked. Destroyed, Bill replied, and what remained of her with it. The goblin gave no sign of relief, only a final glance at the vault corridor before turning away. Then your names will be struck from the vault log. What happened here will not be recorded. Bill gave a grim half-smile. That's probably for the best. An hour later, he stood once more at the gates of Gringotts, the pale morning light just beginning to spread over the rooftops of Diagon Alley. Kenza was beside him, her satchel slung over one shoulder, her wand tucked into her belt. She looked at him with the kind of understanding that came only after surviving something that couldn't truly be explained. "Go home, Weasley," she said. "You've earned it." He nodded. "You as well." She vanished with a quiet crack, leaving only the soft scent of parchment and old ink behind her. Shell Cottage was quiet when he arrived. The gulls were wheeling above the rocks, the tide rolling in gently, and the garden gate creaked faintly in the sea wind. Fleur met him at the door with a tired smile and arms that wrapped around him without question. Inside, Victoire was asleep on the couch, her head resting on a folded blanket, a children's book tucked beneath one hand. Bill knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She murmured something in her sleep, a fragment of song, or perhaps a name, but when he listened closer, it was nothing more than a child's dream, drifting gently in the space between silence and waking. The days that followed were quiet. He wrote no reports, filed no papers. He let the memory of Vatra sink into the still places of his mind, where old dreams and darker things lived but did not stir. Kenza sent one letter, brief and final, confirming that the vault had collapsed cleanly. No magical trace remained. He walked the shore with Victoire in the evenings, tracing runes in the sand, but none of them ever spiraled. The stars overhead moved in proper constellations again. 1 week later, a small parcel arrived at the cottage without owl or courier. It bore no sender's mark. Inside was a single silver thread, faint, nearly invisible, wrapped around a folded slip of parchment. He unrolled it carefully. The parchment was old, the ink delicate, but the message was unmistakable. "You were the last dream. Sleep well, Red One." He stared at it for a long time before stepping outside and letting the sea wind carry the parchment from his hand. It rose briefly, caught the light of the setting sun, and vanished into the waves. Bill Weasley turned and walked back to the cottage, his wand at his side, his daughter's laughter echoing through the walls. And far below, where no door remained, the spiral slept.